The number of people infected with a parasite linked to salads at McDonald's is growing.
McDonald's, Burger King, and Friendly's are being sued for selling chicken they know contains a chemical that can cause cancer, even in small amounts.
It always feels the same, doesn't it? You walk into a McDonald's anywhere in the world, New York, Tokyo, Cape Town, and somehow the experience never changes. The same smell, the same glowing menu, the same burger every time. It's comforting, familiar, safe. But that's the illusion. Behind the golden arches lies something far more calculated than you think. McDonald's didn't become a global empire by chance. They engineered it. Every bite, every burger, every sensation, down to a science. You're not just buying a meal, you're buying consistency, predictability, control. But at what cost? That perfectly shaped patty didn't start as a cow on a pasture. It started in a lab, in a factory, in a boardroom where executives weren't thinking about flavor. They were thinking about margins. You see, when McDonald's offers 100% beef, it's not about purity. It's about perception. Because what matters most to them isn't what's in the meat. It's what you believe is in it. And that belief, it's been carefully crafted. Commercials show farm fields and happy cattle, smiling workers and sizzling grills. But the real story happens far from the cameras, in meat processing plants, where speed matters more than safety, and uniformity matters more than nutrition. The truth is, your burger isn't made for you, it's made for billions, which means it's optimized, not for your health, but for scale, for shelf life, for cost effectiveness. And that's where the cracks begin to show. To deliver the same taste in every country, under every condition, McDonald's has created a product so processed, so modified, that calling it just a burger is a bit like calling a smartphone just a phone. There's more going on than you can see, because uniformity requires control. Control over the animals, control over the feed, control over the workers, control over the narrative. And that control means you never question what's really behind that bite. You never ask where the meat comes from. You never wonder how long it's been frozen. You don't stop to think about what it took to make it taste the same every single time. But maybe you should, because what feels like choice might actually be the absence of it. When every menu looks the same and every option tastes the same, what you're really consuming isn't variety. It's repetition. It's obedience. It's trust in a system that's built to keep you full, but never truly nourished. This isn't about fast food anymore. It's about food control. And McDonald's? They've mastered it. They've turned a hamburger into a commodity. They've turned cravings into currency. And they've turned your trust into profit. So the next time you unwrap that burger and taste that familiar bite, pause. Ask yourself, is this really what I wanted? Or just what I was programmed to expect? Because the illusion is powerful. But the truth is even more dangerous. 100% beef. It sounds pure, honest, straightforward, but those three little words have done more to shield McDonald's from scrutiny than any billion-dollar PR campaign ever could. Because when you hear 100% beef, your brain fills in the blanks. You imagine whole cuts of meat, maybe a well-raised cow, maybe even a local ranch. But none of that is guaranteed, and none of that is required. Because 100% beef doesn't mean grass-fed. It doesn't mean organic. It doesn't mean ethical or fresh or even high quality. It just means that the meat came from a cow. And that's where the Mirage begins. See, the USDA allows fast food giants like McDonald's to label their products as 100% beef, as long as the meat comes from cattle and isn't cut with other animal species. But what you're not told is that this 100% beef can include a slurry of trimmings, connective tissues, and lower-grade cuts, all ground together into something that barely resembles what you think of as beef. According to a report by The Guardian, some of the beef used in fast food chains contains what are known as lean, finely textured beef, an ingredient once dubbed by the media as pink slime. In 2012, ABC News exposed how this treated meat was cleaned with ammonium hydroxide to kill bacteria before being molded back into patties. And while McDonald's claimed it phased out the practice in the US, the same year, there's no federal law banning its use. The doors are still open, quietly. And if that isn't enough to make you pause, consider this. The cattle themselves are raised on concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, where they're pumped with grain, growth hormones, and sometimes antibiotics, just to keep them alive in crowded, filthy conditions. According to the Natural Resources Defense Council, over 70% of antibiotics sold in the US are used in livestock, not to treat sickness, but to prevent it in environments where sickness is inevitable. So yes, your Big Mac is technically made with 100% beef, but it's also made with illusions, because while the phrase is legally accurate, it's emotionally manipulative. It's a psychological shortcut designed to disarm you, to make you feel confident, to keep you from asking better questions. Questions like, where was this meat processed? How were the animals raised? What chemicals or treatments were used? How long has it been frozen? What quality controls exist for something sold by the billions? But you're not supposed to ask those questions. You're supposed to take the phrase at face value, smile, and take another bite. Because the power of the phrase isn't in what it says, it's in what it allows them to hide. So the next time you read the words 100% beef, remember, in a world built on marketing, the truth is rarely that simple. And when it comes to your food, simplicity can be the most dangerous illusion of all. When you bite into a McDonald's burger, you're tasting more than beef. You're tasting the reach of a machine that spans the globe, stretching from the grasslands of Australia to the feedlots of the American Midwest, from processing plants in South America to fast food counters in Shanghai, London, and Dubai. This isn't a kitchen, it's an empire. McDonald's sources its beef from a global web of suppliers. In the US, the company works with giants like Tyson Foods and Cargill, names that may sound familiar, but what they actually do is anything but comforting. These companies process thousands of cattle per day, moving carcasses down assembly lines at lightning speed, where a single error can mean contamination, or worse. According to the USDA, meat inspection plants often report violations related to fecal contamination, improper refrigeration, and dangerous bacteria like E. coli and Salmonella. But McDonald's doesn't stop in America. To feed billions, the company imports beef from countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Brazil. Places where regulations are different, enforcement is inconsistent, and oversight is minimal. And that's where the real danger begins. Take Brazil, for example. In 2017, a massive investigation called Operation Weak Flesh uncovered that some of the country's largest meat processors, some of which supply beef to McDonald's, had been selling rotten meat for years. Inspectors were bribed, expiration dates were falsified, and chemicals were used to mask the smell of decay. This wasn't just a fluke, it was systemic. Yet the beef kept flowing. Why? Because it's cheap. In the food industry, global supply chains are not just about volume, they're about cost efficiency. When beef is cheaper to import from a nation with weak labor laws or loose environmental standards, that's where the supply goes, no matter the consequences. And those consequences aren't just theoretical, they're real, they're local, and they're deadly. When you centralize meat production into a few major processing plants across continents, you increase the risk of outbreaks, recalls, and cross-contamination. A single bad shipment of beef doesn't just affect one restaurant, it affects thousands. In 2018, a beef recall tied to possible salmonella contamination impacted over 12 million pounds of meat across the US. Some of it traced back to suppliers serving fast food chains, but even when illness doesn't strike, the damage is done in quieter ways. Communities near slaughterhouses often suffer from toxic runoff and polluted water. Workers inside these plants, many of them immigrants or underpaid laborers, face dangerous conditions, long hours, and few protections. And the animals? They're nothing more than numbers, funneled through the system with mechanical precision. Also, you can have a consistent burger, fast, cheap, familiar, but at what cost? Because when McDonald's touts global scale, they rarely mention the fragility that comes with it. The risks passed down the chain. The corners cut in silence. The lives, human and animal, caught in the grind of an endless appetite. You don't see that on the wrapper, but it's there, in every bite. It sounds clinical, clean, almost harmless, mechanically separated meat. But beneath that sterile phrase lies one of the most unsettling secrets in the processed meat world, one that has touched McDonald's menu more than once. And though you won't find it on the packaging, its legacy lingers in the shadows of industrial food production. So, what is it? Mechanically separated meat, or MSM, is not a cut of beef or a choice slice of poultry. It's what's left after the cuts are gone, the scraps, the sinew, the tissue clinging to bones after the good parts have been carved away. Rather than discard the remnants, machines step in. High-pressure systems force bones through sieves, stripping away the remaining material, pulverizing it into a paste. It's meat, in the most technical sense of the word. A slurry, a byproduct, a solution to waste. This paste is then treated, flavored, colored, and reshaped into something recognizable, like a chicken nugget or a breakfast sausage. And for years, it found its way into McDonald's offerings. The infamous McNugget, for example, was once a prime suspect. In the early 2000s, viral photos of pink, foamy goo made headlines. An image many believed showed the reality of mechanically separated chicken used in fast food. While McDonald's has publicly denied using MSM in their nuggets today, it's important to understand that the practice was once common industry-wide, and policies have evolved mostly due to public backlash, not internal ethics. Even now, the USDA allows mechanically separated poultry in food products, as long as it's labeled correctly. But here's the catch. Fast food chains don't always sell packaged meat directly to the consumer. The labeling happens upstream, and unless you're reading a supplier's invoice, you may never know what went into that patty, nugget, or sausage. There's another layer of risk too. Mechanically separated meats have been linked to higher levels of bacteria due to the sheer surface area and increased handling during processing. That's why, in 2004, the USDA banned the use of mechanically separated beef in human food entirely, after growing concerns over bovine spongiform encephalopathy, better known as mad cow disease. But poultry, still fair game. So, while McDonald's may no longer use MSM in certain products, they've already benefited from the practice. It helped the chain grow. It helped maximize yield. It helped engineer consistency. And most of all, it helped protect the bottom line. Because MSM isn't about feeding people, it's about not wasting profit. It's about making sure every last scrap of a slaughtered animal is turned into something sellable, something edible, no matter what it takes. It's not a story McDonald's wants you to hear, but it's part of how fast food became so fast, so cheap, so abundant. And once you know what's really behind the curtain, that $1 menu starts to look a whole lot more expensive. It's easy to think of fast food as simple. A burger, a bun, some beef, that's it, right? But that's the fantasy, the comforting illusion of simplicity. In truth, your favorite McDonald's meat products are less like food and more like formulas. Lab-tested, focus-grouped, engineered. Because when you serve millions of meals a day, the goal isn't flavor, it's efficiency, longevity, consistency. And that means the meat in your McDouble isn't just beef, it's a cocktail of enhancers, binders, fillers, and preservatives designed to do one thing: keep the machine running. Let's start with binders. Binders are substances added to help meat hold its shape, especially when it's been ground, pressed, or processed. One common binder used in the fast food world is soy protein concentrate. It's cheap, it's effective, and it adds bulk. But it also introduces a major allergen into your food, one that often goes unnoticed unless you read the fine print. Then there's textured vegetable protein, a soy-based additive. It mimics the mouthfeel of real meat while helping manufacturers stretch beef further. The result? A patty that's technically beef, but bulked up with cheaper material, more yield, less cost. And most customers, they never know the difference. Next come the fillers. In the past, McDonald's and its suppliers have used ingredients like maltodextrin, wheat starch, and modified food starch. These aren't there to nourish you. They're there to absorb moisture, stabilize the product, and reduce shrinkage during cooking. They give meat that perfectly spongy, uniform texture you've come to expect, but they also dilute the actual protein content. And what about preservatives? Compounds like sodium phosphate are used to keep the meat looking fresh, even when it's been frozen, thawed, or shipped across continents. These chemicals bind to water, maintain texture, and give that bounce when you bite into a nugget. But they've also been linked to health issues when consumed in excess, including cardiovascular strain and kidney stress. Then there's the big one, monosodium glutamate, better known as MSG. While McDonald's has claimed to remove MSG from many of its core products in the US, it still appears in items like their spicy chicken McNuggets and some international menu items. MSG enhances flavor, making food more addictive, more craveable. It tricks your brain into thinking you're eating something rich, savory, satisfying, even when the real ingredients are bland and minimal. And don't forget the catch-all, natural flavors sounds innocent. But that phrase can mask a multitude of synthetic compounds, flavor chemicals, and hidden additives. It's a loophole, used not to protect you, but to protect the brand. Because when you see natural, you stop asking questions. You assume safety. You assume truth. But in fast food, assumptions are dangerous. What you're really eating isn't just meat. It's a system, a strategy, a chemical equation fine-tuned to be cheap, scalable, and eerily satisfying. Not because it's real, but because it's designed to feel that way. And by the time you realize it's all been manufactured, it's already too late. You've swallowed the formula. There was a time when the world stopped mid-bite, when images began circulating, bright pink, foamy, almost alien, of what was claimed to be the meat behind your burgers and nuggets. The media gave it a name that would haunt the industry for years: pink slime. It wasn't fiction, it wasn't exaggeration. It was lean, finely textured beef, or LFTB, a meat byproduct made by grinding together the fatty trimmings of beef, separating the fat using a centrifuge, and treating the resulting mush with ammonium hydroxide, a chemical also found in household cleaners. The goal? Kill bacteria, save money, stretch every scrap of meat as far as possible. For years, it worked, quietly, invisibly, until it didn't. In 2012, the truth spilled out. ABC News aired a scathing exposé, and suddenly, the public was outraged. Parents asked what they were feeding their kids. Schools dropped it. Grocers pulled it from shelves. McDonald's, under intense pressure, swiftly announced they would no longer use ammonium-treated beef in their products. It was framed as a victory, a turning point, a correction. But did pink slime ever really go away? Not entirely. While McDonald's may have removed the ammonia process, lean, finely textured beef itself was never banned. In 2019, the USDA reclassified it as simply beef. No warning, no label, no distinction. And here's where the story gets darker. The companies that produce LFTB still supply major processors. Those processors still serve fast food chains. And unless a company voluntarily discloses that they don't use it, there's no way to know what's really in that patty. Because now, it doesn't have to be disclosed. What once shocked the public into outrage has quietly been normalized, legalized, sanitized. It's not that the process disappeared, it's that the language changed. So when you see a label that says 100% beef, it might still contain lean, finely textured beef. And unless the restaurant or the brand tells you otherwise, you'll never know if you're eating the real thing or what's left over after the real thing is gone. It's not about safety anymore. It's about perception. Because technically, ammonium hydroxide is approved by the FDA. Technically, it reduces pathogens like E. coli and salmonella. Technically, it's legal. But what about ethics? What about transparency? What about the difference between feeding people and feeding them something that just barely qualifies? In the pink slime era, the scandal was the exposure. But today, the scandal is the silence. Because while the imagery may have faded, the methods haven't. They've just been cleaned up, rebranded, tucked neatly behind new words and corporate statements. And if that doesn't disturb you, it should, because the only thing more dangerous than knowing what's in your food is not knowing at all. It starts long before the grill, long before the patty hits the bun, long before the truck drops off boxes stamped with golden arches. It starts on a factory farm, where cattle are packed tightly together, shoulder to shoulder, often knee-deep in filth, where sickness is a guarantee, and where survival doesn't come from clean conditions, but from drugs, lots of them. In modern industrial beef production, antibiotics are not just used to treat disease, they're used to prevent it, preemptively, routinely, even when no illness is present. Because in an overcrowded, high-stress environment, the only way to keep animals alive long enough to reach slaughter weight is medication. And McDonald's, they're one of the biggest buyers of that system. According to a report by the Natural Resources Defense Council, an estimated 70% of medically important antibiotics in the US are sold for use in livestock, not humans, not hospitals, animals. Many of which end up in the global fast food supply chain. Why? Because antibiotics don't just prevent disease, they promote growth, faster weight gain, bigger cattle, more meat, more profit. It's a quiet pharmaceutical shortcut, one that's been used for decades to meet the demands of an ever-hungry market. But here's the problem. The more antibiotics are used in livestock, the less effective they become for humans. It's called antibiotic resistance, a silent public health crisis that's been building in the shadows. When bacteria are exposed to low levels of antibiotics over and over again, they adapt, they evolve, they become immune. And when those superbugs find their way into humans through contaminated meat, runoff water, or even direct contact, they don't respond to treatment. According to the World Health Organization, antibiotic-resistant bacteria kill over 1.2 million people globally each year. And experts warn that if this trend continues, routine infections could once again become deadly. Simple surgeries could become life-threatening. Modern medicine could unravel, all because of a burger. To be fair, McDonald's has made public commitments to reduce the use of antibiotics in its beef supply. In 2018, they announced a global antibiotic policy and pledged to measure and report antibiotic use across their top beef sourcing markets. But the follow-through has been slow, the transparency limited. A 2022 report from the advocacy group Chain Reaction ranked McDonald's with a near-failing grade for antibiotic stewardship in its beef supply. Other major chains have made bigger strides, but McDonald's? Still lagging. Still sourcing from suppliers who lean heavily on antibiotics just to keep cattle alive long enough to sell. Because it's not just about feeding people, it's about feeding them fast, cheap, and predictably. Even if it comes at the cost of future medicine, even if it means trading short-term convenience for long-term risk. Because in the world of fast food, illness is someone else's problem. Accountability is optional, and the real damage won't show up on a receipt. It'll show up in a hospital room when the antibiotics stop working. And by then, it'll already be too late. There's a story behind every burger, but it's not one they show you in commercials. It's not printed on the tray liner or etched into the cardboard box. It's hidden, intentionally, behind closed gates, steel walls, and the roar of conveyor belts. Because the real journey of a McDonald's burger doesn't begin with a smile. It begins with confinement. The life of a cow destined for fast food is short, brutal, and mechanized. From the moment they're born, these animals are part of a system built for speed, not compassion. Most are raised on industrial feedlots, often referred to as CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. The name alone says everything. There is no pasture, no rolling green hills, just mud, fencing, and bodies packed tightly together. Here, the air is thick with ammonia. The ground is soaked in urine and feces. There's little room to move, little access to shade, little peace. And yet, this is where they grow, not naturally, but artificially. Pumped with grain they were never meant to digest, given growth hormones to accelerate weight gain, injected with antibiotics to survive unsanitary conditions. The goal isn't health, it's size, and the faster they grow, the sooner they're ready for slaughter. But slaughter doesn't mean the end of suffering. It's the crescendo. Once they reach target weight, they're loaded onto trucks, often after enduring electric prods, panic, and injuries during transport. Some collapse, some arrive already dead. The rest are driven into slaughterhouses where efficiency rules above all else. These aren't gentle deaths. They are rapid, industrialized killings designed to process hundreds of animals per hour. The line rarely stops. Mistakes happen. Animals are sometimes improperly stunned. Some are still conscious when their throats are slit. Others remain aware as they are skinned or dismembered. A 2021 USDA audit revealed that violations related to inhumane slaughter are not rare, and enforcement is inconsistent. But you'll never see that at McDonald's. You'll see glossy photos of sizzling patties, smiling kids, happy cows, and animated pastures. You'll hear words like responsibly sourced and animal welfare standards. But behind the branding is a system that treats life as a unit of profit. McDonald's has made pledges, of course, promises to improve conditions, to phase out certain suppliers, to adopt better practices. But much of it is voluntary, much of it is vague, and much of it, according to watchdog groups like Compassion in World Farming and Mercy for Animals, falls short of meaningful change. Because at its core, this isn't a system designed to honor life. It's one designed to harvest it. And as long as consumers continue to demand cheap, fast, and convenient meat, the suffering will continue. Out of sight, out of mind. Until one day, you stop to ask, what's the real cost of this burger? Not in dollars, but in lives. And once you've asked that question, it's hard to ever taste it the same way again. The rainforest feels far away, a place of mystery, of untouched wilderness, of ancient trees and tribal echoes. It's hard to imagine that your quarter pounder could have anything to do with the Amazon, but that's the lie, because it does. And the truth is far more disturbing than you've been told. Every second, a piece of the world's most vital ecosystem is disappearing. Bulldozers push through the jungle, reducing centuries-old trees to ash and rubble. The land is scorched, cleared, and repurposed. Not for cities, not for homes, for cattle. And behind that transformation is a global hunger, an insatiable appetite for cheap beef. The kind of beef that ends up in fast food chains. The kind of beef that ends up on your tray at McDonald's. Brazil, home to nearly 60% of the Amazon rainforest, is also one of the world's largest beef exporters. And for years, investigators have drawn direct lines between deforestation in the Amazon and industrial cattle ranching. According to a 2020 report by Amnesty International, cattle raised on illegally deforested land have entered the supply chains of major meat packers, and those meat packers supply McDonald's. The supply chain is complex, intentionally so. Cattle may be born on deforested land, then transferred to clean farms before slaughter. This laundering of livestock allows corporations to maintain plausible deniability while still reaping the rewards of cheap, illegal grazing land. And McDonald's? They've promised action. They've pledged zero deforestation across their supply chain. They've released statements, partnered with watchdogs, signed on to global pledges. But the forest keeps burning. A 2022 investigation by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism found that meat tied to deforestation was still reaching international markets, despite corporate promises. The system is too big, too fast, too fragmented. And while McDonald's claims to monitor its suppliers, oversight is weak, enforcement is rare, and violations are often buried in paperwork and legal gray zones. Because it's not about forests, it's about burgers. And when billions of them are sold every year, the pressure to produce outweighs the promise to protect. Trees become obstacles, ecosystems become collateral, indigenous lands become battlegrounds, and the destruction continues, not just to the environment, but to the climate. The Amazon is one of the planet's greatest carbon sinks, absorbing greenhouse gases and stabilizing weather patterns. But as it's reduced to pastures and charred earth, its ability to regulate the climate collapses. Scientists now warn that parts of the Amazon are emitting more carbon than they absorb. Also, we can have more beef, faster, cheaper. With a side of fries, you won't taste the rainforest in your Big Mac, but it's there, in the smoke that once was trees, in the soil stripped of life, in the silence where animals once roamed. And unless the demand shifts, unless the chain breaks, the price won't just be ecological. It will be irreversible. Because once the forest is gone, there's no getting it back. Fresh, never frozen. It rolls off the tongue like a promise, like a breakthrough, as if, suddenly, the food you've eaten for years has been reborn, healthier, cleaner, somehow more honest. McDonald's pushed the message hard. Billboards, commercials, social media campaigns, all proudly declaring that their quarter pounders are now made with fresh beef, cooked to order. But what does fresh really mean? Because in the food industry, words don't just describe reality, they create it. Fresh evokes images of farm-to-table simplicity, of local butchers, of meat prepared the same day it's eaten. But McDonald's isn't a farmer's market. It's a global machine. And the truth behind their branding tells a different story. When McDonald's says fresh, they're referring to a specific subset of beef patties, mostly in the US, mostly for quarter pounders and some specialty burgers. Not every patty, not every country, not even every product on the menu. The rest? Still frozen, still processed, still part of the old system. But the branding doesn't mention that. The fine print gets lost behind the bold claim, and that's by design. Even for the fresh patties, the story isn't as clean as it sounds. According to reports from suppliers, the beef used is still mass-produced, still packaged in factories, still transported across vast distances in refrigerated trucks. It may not be frozen solid, but it's not being carved behind the counter either. It's chilled, vacuum-sealed, stored for days, sometimes weeks, before it ever sees a grill. And here's the trick. The USDA doesn't have a strict legal definition for fresh in this context. As long as the product hasn't been frozen below 26 degrees Fahrenheit, it can still be labeled fresh. That means fresh doesn't necessarily mean recently butchered. It doesn't mean local. It doesn't mean untouched. It means not technically frozen. So why the push? Because it's good marketing. In recent years, consumer preferences have shifted. People want less processed, more natural, more real. Chains like Five Guys and Shake Shack have built entire empires on the promise of quality ingredients and hand-formed patties. McDonald's had to respond, but instead of changing the system, they changed the story. By using the word fresh, they reset the narrative, redirected your attention, made you believe that the company had evolved, that this wasn't the McDonald's of yesterday, that the food you're eating now is somehow better, cleaner, safer. But under the surface, little has changed. The supply chain remains industrial. The cows still come from crowded feedlots. The meat is still heavily processed and tightly controlled. What's changed is perception, because if they can convince you it's fresh, they don't have to prove that it's good. They just have to make you feel better, think better, buy more. Fresh is not a guarantee. It's a performance. And behind the curtain, the system that built the burger remains exactly the same. It's not just that it tastes good, it's that you crave it, long after you've eaten it, long after you've told yourself you're done. There's a reason that first bite of a McDonald's burger feels different, a reason it hits harder than the one you made at home. And it's not just nostalgia, it's neuroscience. Behind every sizzle, every savory note, every waft of burger-scented air floating from the drive-through window, there's science, carefully crafted, deliberately engineered, designed to bypass your logic and go straight for your brain. Because this isn't just food, it's formula. McDonald's doesn't simply cook beef, they enhance it, amplify it, reinforce it with a symphony of additives, fats, and artificial flavors, all meant to mimic the deep, satisfying pleasure of home-cooked meat while stripping away the effort. One of the key players is umami, often called the fifth taste. That rich, meaty, savory flavor you can't quite describe but instantly recognize. It's naturally found in aged cheeses, tomatoes, and slow-roasted meats. But McDonald's doesn't wait for nature. They recreate it. Using compounds like disodium inosinate and disodium guanylate, often paired with MSG or similar glutamates, they boost the intensity of flavors. These chemicals work synergistically to excite the taste buds and deliver an almost addictive depth to even the most processed products. It's not accidental, it's intentional. The aroma? That's engineered too. Flavor scientists, yes, that's a real job, develop proprietary scent molecules designed to mimic the smell of a burger just pulled off the grill. These aren't created in a kitchen, but in labs, because up to 80% of what we perceive as taste is actually smell. When you walk past a McDonald's and feel your stomach growl, it's not just hunger, it's memory, it's chemistry, it's manipulation. Fat plays a starring role. McDonald's meat products are formulated to include just enough fat to coat the tongue, trigger the brain's pleasure centers, and deliver a sensory hit that feels more satisfying than lean meat ever could. Combined with salt, sugar, and that irresistible crunch of the bun, your brain is wired to want more, even when you're full. And let's not forget the psychology of consistency. That burger you ate at age 6, it tastes the same today. That's not magic. That's control. McDonald's has invested millions in making sure every bite, everywhere on Earth, delivers the same chemical experience, because sameness is comfort. And comfort sells. This is how food becomes habit, how habit becomes addiction. You think you're choosing McDonald's because it's quick, easy, or nostalgic. But the truth is, they've already chosen you. From the first engineered bite to the last addictive chew, your taste buds have been programmed, your cravings reinforced, and your loyalty quietly purchased. This isn't flavor, this is design. And once you see the strings behind the curtain, it becomes harder to ignore how deep the manipulation runs. The warnings are there, the studies, the investigations, the growing concern from health experts, environmentalists, and food advocates alike. You'd think by now the backlash would have broken through, that regulation would have caught up. The companies like McDonald's would be forced to change, but they haven't. And that's not by accident, it's by design. McDonald's has built more than a brand. It's built a fortress, one made not of stone or steel, but of legal loopholes, industry lobbying, and clever semantics that shield it from real accountability. Start with the labeling laws. Terms like natural flavors, 100% beef, or fresh all carry emotional weight, but little legal meaning. The FDA doesn't tightly regulate these phrases. There's no universal standard, no mandatory testing. As long as a company can technically argue their claim, they're protected. The consumer, left in the dark. Then there's the power of self-regulation. Fast food giants like McDonald's often tout internal guidelines, voluntary commitments to improve sustainability, reduce antibiotics, enhance animal welfare. They release polished PDFs full of goals and future targets. But here's the truth. These promises are rarely binding. They're not enforced by government agencies. And when deadlines pass without progress, there are no fines, no lawsuits, just silence. Behind the scenes, the influence runs deeper. McDonald's, like many in the food industry, has spent millions lobbying lawmakers. According to OpenSecrets.org, McDonald's Corporation has contributed heavily to political campaigns and industry associations that push for favorable policies that keep regulations weak, labeling vague, and accountability far out of reach. Even when violations surface, tainted meat, worker exploitation, animal cruelty, the legal response is slow, fragmented, and often watered down. Many violations are handled at the supplier level. McDonald's distances itself through a web of subcontractors and third-party processors. It becomes nearly impossible to pin responsibility on the brand itself. And when lawsuits do arise, McDonald's lawyers are ready, armed with ironclad contracts, arbitration clauses, and decades of legal precedent designed to limit liability and avoid courtrooms. Even when customers try to hold the company accountable, the maze of legal protections often ensures one thing: nothing sticks. Add to that the power of PR. When negative stories break, McDonald's doesn't wait to defend. They pivot, they rebrand, they launch new campaigns, tweak the menu, release a healthier option. They know how to control the narrative. They don't deny the concerns, they dilute them. Because if you can't be stopped, you make yourself look like you're already changing. That's the game. And McDonald's plays it well. Regulation doesn't stop them. Public outcry doesn't shake them. Because when you sit at the intersection of food, business, and culture, when your product is a global icon, you don't have to answer to the same rules. You write your own. And the result? A system where corporations are protected and consumers are not. They tell you the calories. They might even show you the fat content if you ask for the pamphlet. But what McDonald's doesn't advertise, what never makes it to the tray liner or TV screen, are the long-term health risks embedded in every bite. Because this isn't just fast food, it's processed food, highly processed, intensively engineered, and with it comes a chemical cocktail of risks the marketing never mentions. Start with sodium. A single McDonald's meal can easily exceed half or more of your recommended daily salt intake. A quarter pounder with cheese alone clocks in at over 1,100 milligrams. Add fries, add a soda, add one more item, and you're there, pushing levels linked to high blood pressure, heart disease, and kidney strain. The CDC warns that excess sodium is a major contributor to cardiovascular disease, the leading cause of death in the US. But salt is just the beginning. Processed meats, the kind used in breakfast sandwiches, sausage patties, and certain beef products, contain preservatives like nitrates and nitrites. These compounds are used to preserve color, enhance flavor, and extend shelf life. But studies have shown that when exposed to high heat, these chemicals can form nitrosamines, compounds known to be carcinogenic. In fact, the World Health Organization classified processed meats as Group 1 carcinogens, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. It's not just about cancer, it's about metabolic disruption. McDonald's menu is heavy on refined carbs, seed oils, and added sugars, ingredients that spike blood glucose, fuel inflammation, and encourage insulin resistance. Over time, this pattern of eating has been linked to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But again, you won't see that on the packaging. There's no warning label on the burger box. No disclosure when you pull up to the drive-thru. The messaging is about joy, convenience, nostalgia, never risk, never damage. And the portions? They've grown. What was once a treat is now a habit. What was once an indulgence is now breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Supersized servings have trained generations to normalize excess, and the impact is measurable. According to a study published in The Lancet, diets high in processed foods now account for 1 in 5 deaths globally. Let that sink in, 1 in 5. But McDonald's has the luxury of distance. They don't have to face the aftermath. The hospital visits, the prescriptions, the chronic fatigue, the emotional toll of bodies breaking down under the weight of years of hyperpalatable, hyper-processed food. They just keep serving. Smiling, offering limited-time items and nostalgic throwbacks while quietly profiting from the cycle of harm. Because it's not just food, it's a slow erosion of health, normalized by repetition, protected by silence, and driven by one goal: profit. And the real danger? It doesn't come with a warning. It comes with fries. It's one thing to guess, to suspect, to wonder what really happens behind the counter, past the fryer, beyond the stainless steel prep table. But when former employees speak, the guessing ends. And what's left is confirmation. Because those who've worked inside McDonald's have seen things that never make it to the commercials. And once you hear what they've shared, the next burger might not go down so easy. Let's start with the meat. Multiple ex-workers across Reddit threads, Glassdoor reviews, and viral TikToks tell a similar story. The patties arrive in boxes, stacked, vacuum-sealed, often grayish in color, not the vibrant red you might expect. Why? Because real beef loses color when it's been sitting, and the color doesn't always return when it's cooked. Storage is another concern. Meat is often kept in large refrigerators, sometimes left out too long between prep and cooking. One former shift manager described instances where patties were dropped on the floor, then picked up and put right back on the grill. Not occasionally, routinely. Not maliciously, but because the pace was relentless and the pressure to keep things moving was constant. Another former employee posted a photo of thawing beef left beside an open mop bucket. He said it wasn't an isolated incident. It was just how things worked on a busy day. And then there's timing. McDonald's has strict holding windows, guidelines on how long cooked meat can sit before it must be discarded, but those guidelines aren't always followed. When managers are short-staffed or drive-through lines are too long, the priority shifts. Meat that's been sitting too long, it might be reused or mixed with fresher product to mask the difference. One whistleblower admitted they'd sometimes wipe down old patties with paper towels, reheat them, and send them out. It didn't happen every day, but it happened enough. Others tell stories of freezer doors left ajar overnight, of temperature logs being updated retroactively, of workers too overwhelmed or too undertrained to question whether what they were serving was still safe. And when employees raised concerns, many say they were told to stay quiet or were brushed off because efficiency came first, because throwing out meat was throwing away profit. This isn't just about one rogue location. These are recurring themes. From small towns to big cities, ex-workers echo the same message. The system prioritizes speed, not safety, uniformity, not ethics. But perhaps the most chilling detail is how quickly you stop seeing it, how fast you adjust. One former crew member said, "At first, it grossed me out. But after a week, it was just normal." That's the real danger. When something is done often enough, it stops feeling wrong. When enough people stop asking questions, the system stays intact, quiet, unchallenged. And you? You keep eating, never knowing who touched your food, how long it sat, or what corners were cut to get it in your hands that fast. Sometimes the truth isn't buried deep. It's sitting right there, under the heat lamp. It always starts with convenience. You're tired, you're rushing, you're craving something easy. And then, there it is, the glowing arches, the drive-through line, the menu that never changes. And before you know it, the bag is in your hands. The smell fills the car. The first bite is already happening. No questions asked. But now, you know. You know about the supply chains, the chemicals, the loopholes, the animals, the forests, the manipulation. And once you know, truly know, it becomes harder to pretend it's just food. Because it's not. It's a system, a trap. One engineered to feel comforting while quietly doing harm to your body, to your mind, to the planet. But here's the truth they don't want you to hear. You can break free. You can reclaim your plate. It doesn't require perfection. It doesn't mean swearing off every indulgence. But it does mean waking up, looking closer, asking harder questions. It means understanding that food is power. And you've been giving that power away to a corporation that sees you not as a person, but as a data point. Start with the label. Read it. All of it. Every line, every additive, every mysterious flavoring. Learn what it means. Look up what you don't recognize. Most importantly, don't assume that just because it's legal, it's safe. Then, take back your kitchen. Cook more. Not because it's trendy, but because it's the only way to truly know what you're eating. Real ingredients. Real choices. No hidden binders. No reheated mystery patties. Just food. Alive, vibrant, whole. Buy less, but buy better. You don't need a cart full of organic everything. You need awareness. Choose local when you can. Support farmers who treat animals and the land with dignity. Understand where your meat comes from. Know your butcher. Know your source. And if you can't pronounce it, maybe don't eat it. Fast food thrives on your disconnection. It feeds on your distractions. It wants you numb, busy, overwhelmed, because in that state, you won't stop and think. You'll just consume. But you can choose something different. You can choose food that nourishes, not numbs, that heals, not harms, that respects life rather than exploits it. And maybe that means saying no the next time you pass that glowing sign. Maybe it means skipping the drive-thru and making something simple from scratch. Maybe it means talking to your kids, not about calories, but about ingredients, not about weight, but about awareness. Because the real power isn't in the food, it's in the choice. And every time you say no to processed meat, to synthetic flavor, to systems built on suffering, you say yes to something better. This isn't just about McDonald's. It's about reclaiming the most basic human act, eating. It's about no longer being fooled. It's about waking up. And it starts right now. Take back your plate. Take back your power. And never look at that burger the same way again.